Why can't the English teach their children how to speak? This verbal class distinction by now should be antique. If you spoke as she does, sir, instead of the way you do, why, you might be selling flowers too.
I beg your pardon, sir.
An Englishman's way of speaking absolutely classifies him. The moment he talks, he makes some other Englishman
Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of the My Fair Lady original cast soundtrack album, which was released in 1956. It's from a Broadway show. It's my first time listening to it. So apparently this album pretty much invented the idea of the show's soundtrack album and set a template for the future for albums like this. And also, it sold really well. Actually, they were, I understand, somewhat surprised by how well it sold, because it sold to people who weren't necessarily theatre goers. And the theatre going audience were a particular kind of people. But there were other people who bought this album and presumably enjoyed it. You would hope so. So it had quite a wide appeal. So let's jump off a little bit and just talk about My Fair Lady, which is a stage musical by Lerner and Lowe, who I vaguely heard of. It opened in 1956, and it had a surprise success, which then led to this album being made to capitalise on that success. It's a surprisingly successful for a story about English people, but maybe it's because it somewhat makes fun of we English people, which me as an English person, I'm completely fine with that, by the way. It was based on a 1913 play called Pygmalion, written by George Bernard Shaw, and it's about an English professor of phonetics who takes it upon himself to teach posh diction to a Cockney flower-selling lady. So it's about class and speech and about people changing and, of course, about romance. And I knew the basics of the story before I read up on it. I knew that it was about somebody being taught how to speak posh. I think it's possible I've even seen Pygmalion once, many years ago, or some version of this story. I've certainly seen some version of it, as I say, at the Edinburgh Fringe quite a lot of years ago. So we've got here the two kind of stars are Julie Andrews singing as Eliza Doolittle. And this was before Mary Poppins and the Sound of Music, which were the two things that made her humongously popular. And Rex Harrison, whose name I know, but I don't know anything more about him, as Professor Henry Higgins. The musical background is orchestral, which is, understandable for a musical at this stage. It wasn't until quite a bit later that you started to get rock instrumentation along with the band/orchestra for a musical. This, to me, occasionally, I think it feels a bit Gilbert and Sullivan-y, which is somewhat earlier in time than this, but not not a huge amount, looking backwards from now. The singing is less operatic, though, than something like Light Opera. It's definitely a musical. A couple of songs that I already knew. So there's On the Street Where You Live, which is a song that, so I know it. I wouldn't say I don't hate it, but it's not one I go, oh yes, this song. And Get Me to the Church on Time, which is a Cockney musical classic. When it came on, I thought, oh, so that's where this song comes from. Okay. The rest of the songs, didn't know. There's some reasonable tunes and there's some well-written words, especially for Professor Higgins. He's got some great lines about in two songs about wanting to be a bachelor and another song about why can't women be more like men. And it just is not that I agree with his sentiments. I think that they bring out his character really well. And some of the phrasing and rhyming is excellent. The high point for me in the rhyming was rhyming Budapest with the word the phrase you couldn't find a Rudapest. Just that's a little bit of, it's really cheesy, but it's also masterful to my mind. Julie Andrews, of course, has a very clear, technically amazing voice and sometimes quite nuanced delivery. I feel like it's a shame that she doesn't have more or better song on this album. I feel like there's a reasonable amount of showcasing her, but they could have done more for that. And I know that it's not all the songs from the show that are on the album, so maybe there were some other songs that could have done a better job of that that were left off the album. So let's kind of think it as got several questions to ask about it as an album. So does it work as a memory jogger for people who've seen the musical? Yes, although uh, and I'm only guessing here from not having seen the musical, I think it's a bit light on the ending stuff. Comparing the list of songs here from the list of songs in the show, I would say that they kind of left off a few towards the end, and you don't really get you get some of the idea of what's going on in the play, but you can't really get the plot through the album. Particularly, you don't understand what happens at the end on the album. Does it work for people who don't know the play? Less well, I'd say. And this is one of my criticisms of soundtrack albums generally, is that they often don't work as well as albums as some other albums do. But it's still got some nice songs and some decent music. It's definitely of its time, but it's okay as an album listening experience, I thought. So does it work as an album? Just about, I'd say. Does it work in making me want to see the show? And that's one thing that possibly they were after in releasing the album. Actually, yes, a bit. I wouldn't crawl over broken glass or uh, fly to Prague to see the show, but if there was a relatively local, relatively easy to get to, relatively easy to buy tickets for version of the show, and I happen to be free, I might go, oh, you know what? I heard that album. It sounded intriguing. Maybe I'll go see the show. So maybe it did work in that sense. That is me wrapping up now. So this is what I think of the album in the last few minutes. I'd love to know what you think of this album, what you think of the show. I feel like I've responded quite well, given that historically I'm not a huge fan of musicals. I'm starting to get into some of them individually more now as I hear the soundtrack albums. But yeah, please let me know what you think of the album, of the show, of Julie Andrews, anything like this. And you can do that by leaving a comment in the comment section, which is somewhere down there. But that's it from me for now.
The Lord above gave man an arm of iron, so he could do his job and never shirk. The Lord above gave man an arm of iron, but with a little bit of luck, with a little bit of luck, someone else will do the blinking